I pulled into my mother's driveway that bright Christmas morning, feeling optimistic for the first time in months. Emma bounced excitedly in her car seat, clutching the homemade ornament she'd crafted for Grandma Patricia. I rang the doorbell expecting warm hugs and holiday cheer. Instead, my mother opened the door, saw Emma beside me, and rolled her eyes dramatically. Her words hit like ice water. "Wish you'd asked before showing up." The living room fell silent. Emma whispered, "Should we go, Dad?" I nodded and we left without creating a scene. The drive home stretched endlessly while Emma stared out the window in silence. Her carefully wrapped gift for Grandma Patricia sat untouched on her lap, the bright red bow now seeming mockingly cheerful. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, searching for words to explain what had just happened without crushing her 8-year-old spirit completely. "Did I do something wrong, Daddy?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong at all." I pulled into our driveway and turned to face her properly. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings that don't make much sense. Emma nodded solemnly, though confusion still clouded her bright blue eyes. We spent Christmas Day quietly together, watching holiday movies and eating takeout Chinese food from Golden Dragon restaurant. Emma drew pictures of snowmen and Christmas trees with her new colored pencils, occasionally asking if we could call Grandma Patricia later. Each question felt like a small knife twisting in my chest. I tried explaining that Grandma seemed tired and maybe needed some rest, but Emma's innocent questions kept coming. Does Grandma not love me anymore? Did I make her mad when I drew that picture last week? Should I have worn my fancy dress instead of my Christmas sweater? Each inquiry broke my heart a little more. This was supposed to be Emma's magical Christmas morning, with extended family cousins playing together and the warm chaos of holiday traditions. Instead, we were eating lo mein noodles in our quiet living room, while I scrambled for age-appropriate explanations. By December 26th, I'd almost convinced myself that things would blow over naturally. Maybe Mom had been stressed about hosting duties or dealing with too many family members arriving simultaneously. Perhaps calling her later in the week would smooth everything over. Then my phone started ringing. The first call came from my brother Jake at 7:38 in the morning. His voice sounded strange, shaky in a way I'd never heard before. "Roger, we need to talk. Mom's in the hospital." Before I could respond properly, the line went dead. I immediately tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic started building in my chest as I dialed again with no success. 20 minutes later, my sister Lauren called, her words coming out between sobs. "You have to come back. Something terrible happened at brunch after you left." "What are you talking about? Is Mom okay?" "Just get to General Hospital. We're all here. She collapsed during dinner and they rushed her in an ambulance." The drive to the hospital felt surreal. Emma stayed with my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, while I raced across town, my mind spinning with possibilities. Had Mom had a heart attack? A stroke? Was the stress of hosting Christmas brunch too much for her? The hospital waiting room looked like a family reunion gone wrong. Jake sat hunched over in a plastic chair, his face pale and drawn. Lauren paced near the windows, still in her Christmas dress, but now wrinkled and stained with tears. Her husband Marcus stood awkwardly by the vending machines while their twin boys sat quietly coloring in activity books. Most shocking was seeing Jake's wife, Stephanie, sitting apart from everyone else, her perfectly styled blonde hair now disheveled, and her usual confident demeanor completely absent. She kept checking her phone and wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. "What happened?" I asked Jake directly. "She just collapsed right at the dinner table. One minute she was passing the green bean casserole, the next minute she was on the floor. The paramedics said her blood pressure was dangerously low." Lauren joined our conversation, her voice still trembling. "Roger, there's something else. Something we didn't know." Dr. Amanda Foster appeared in scrubs, clipboard in hand. She gathered our family in a small consultation room that smelled like disinfectant and anxiety. Her expression was professionally compassionate, but serious. Your mother is stable for now, but I need to discuss her medical history with you. She's been receiving treatment for advanced pancreatic cancer for the past 8 months. The words hit like a physical blow. Cancer, 8 months. None of us had any idea. That's impossible, I said immediately. She never mentioned anything about cancer. She would have told us. Dr. Foster consulted her charts. According to our records, she specifically requested that her diagnosis remain confidential. However, she did list one family member as her emergency contact and medical information recipient. She looked directly at Stephanie. Mrs. Stevens, you've been receiving updates on your mother-in-law's condition and treatment progress since April. The room went completely silent. Every family member turned to stare at Stephanie, who suddenly looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. Stephanie knew. Lauren's voice rose in disbelief. You knew Mom had cancer and didn't tell any of us. Stephanie's composed facade crumbled entirely. She made me promise not to say anything. She didn't want to ruin everyone's holidays or make Christmas about her being sick. 8 months, Stephanie. Jake's voice was barely controlled. You've known for 8 months that my mother was dying, and you never said a word to me. She wasn't dying when this started. The doctors thought they caught it early enough for treatment. She was supposed to get better. Dr. Foster interrupted our family chaos. I'm afraid the cancer has progressed significantly. The treatment options at this point are limited to palliative care. We're looking at weeks, possibly a few months at most. The devastating news settled over our family like a suffocating blanket. Our mother was dying, and half of us were finding out for the first time in a hospital waiting room 2 days after Christmas. But the shock wasn't over yet. There's another issue we need to address, Dr. Foster continued. Your mother's insurance has been declining coverage for several treatments because they claim insufficient documentation of medical necessity. Apparently, there have been some irregularities with her billing and payment history that need immediate attention. Stephanie shifted uncomfortably in her chair. What kind of irregularities? Large cash payments for treatments that were supposedly covered by insurance and several instances where treatments were paid for twice through different accounts. Our billing department flagged it as potentially fraudulent activity. I looked at Stephanie carefully. Something about her expression didn't match someone who was simply surprised by billing errors. Stephanie, I said slowly, as Mom's emergency contact, you would have been handling her insurance communications and medical payments, right? I was just helping her navigate the paperwork. Cancer treatment is complicated, and she was overwhelmed by all the forms and phone calls. But Jake was staring at his wife with growing suspicion. You told me Mom was doing fine financially. You said she didn't need any help with medical expenses. She didn't want you to worry about money while she was sick. Dr. Foster cleared her throat diplomatically. Perhaps this family discussion should continue privately. Your mother is awake now and asking to see everyone. However, I should mention that she's been quite distressed about family conflicts, and specifically asked about Roger and Emma several times. As we walked toward Mom's room, pieces of a horrible puzzle started fitting together in my mind. Stephanie had known about the cancer for 8 months. She'd been handling Mom's medical communications and payments. She'd been present when Mom made the decision to keep the diagnosis secret from her own children. And most damning of all, she'd been at the Christmas brunch early that morning, arriving 40 minutes before anyone else according to Jake. She'd had plenty of time to coach Mom on exactly what to say when I arrived with Emma. The woman who'd convinced my dying mother to exclude me from our final Christmas together had been sitting on this devastating secret for 8 months, while pretending everything was perfectly normal. Walking into Mom's hospital room felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Patricia looked fragile against the stark white pillows, her usually vibrant complexion now ashen and drawn. IV lines snaked from her arms, while monitors beeped steadily in the background. When she saw me approaching her bedside, tears immediately started flowing down her cheeks. Roger, honey, I'm so sorry about Christmas morning. I don't know what came over me. I took her hand gently, feeling how thin and cold her fingers had become. Mom, don't worry about that right now. We need to focus on getting you better. I was so scared about telling you kids about the cancer. Stephanie said you had enough problems with your divorce and Emma's adjustment issues. She convinced me that keeping it quiet would protect everyone from unnecessary worry during the holidays. Behind me, I heard Jake make a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Lauren moved closer to Mom's other side, reaching for her free hand. Mom, we're your children. We should have been here supporting you through this whole thing, not left in the dark. Patricia's eyes darted towards Stephanie, who remained standing near the doorway. Stephanie's been such a tremendous help with all the medical appointments and insurance paperwork. I don't think I could have managed the complexity without her guidance. Dr. Foster had mentioned irregularities with billing and payments, which meant I needed to understand exactly what kind of help Stephanie had been providing. As Patricia's son and legal power of attorney for medical decisions, I had every right to review her treatment history and financial arrangements. Mom, I'd like to meet with your oncologist and get a complete picture of your treatment plan. We need to coordinate your care properly going forward. Of course, sweetheart. Dr. Martinez has been wonderful, though some of the newer treatments have been quite expensive even with Medicare coverage. Stephanie spoke up from across the room. Patricia, you should rest now. Too much discussion might tire you out unnecessarily. Something about Stephanie's tone struck me as controlling rather than caring. She seemed eager to limit Mom's conversation about medical details, which raised red flags given the billing irregularities Dr. Foster had mentioned. Over the next several hours, I began coordinating with the hospital staff to understand Mom's condition and care requirements. The oncology team explained that her cancer had indeed progressed beyond the point where aggressive treatment would be beneficial. The focus now needed to be on pain management and quality of life during her remaining time. But when I requested copies of her medical records and billing history, I discovered disturbing inconsistencies. According to the hospital's financial office, Mom had been paying cash for several expensive treatments that should have been fully covered by her Medicare Advantage plan. The total out-of-pocket expenses over 8 months exceeded $37,000. That doesn't make sense, I told the billing coordinator. Medicare Advantage plans have annual out-of-pocket maximums around $7,500. How could she owe this much? Someone representing themselves as her medical power of attorney told our billing department that she preferred to pay cash up front to avoid insurance delays, then submit reimbursement claims later. Who specifically made those arrangements? The billing coordinator consulted her computer records. Stephanie Stevens listed as her daughter-in-law and medical advocate. My stomach dropped. As Patricia's actual power of attorney, I knew that no one else had legal authority to make financial decisions about her medical care. Stephanie had been misrepresenting her authority while making expensive payment arrangements that drained Mom's savings. When I returned to Mom's room, I found Jake sitting beside her bed, while Lauren and Marcus had taken their boys to the hospital cafeteria. Stephanie was noticeably absent. Where's Stephanie? I asked Jake. She said she needed to run home and check on our kids, maybe grab some clothes since we'll probably be staying here tonight. This gave me an opportunity to speak with Jake privately about the financial irregularities I'd discovered. When I explained what the billing office had told me, Jake's face went completely white. That's impossible, Roger. Stephanie never mentioned anything about Mom paying cash for treatments. She told me the insurance was handling everything and that Mom's finances were completely stable. Jake, $37,000 is missing from Mom's accounts. Someone has been making unauthorized payments while misrepresenting their legal authority. Are you saying Stephanie stole from Mom? I'm saying the evidence points toward financial mismanagement at minimum and potentially elder financial abuse. Jake stared at his hands for a long moment. Roger, I need to tell you something else. Something that's been bothering me for months. He explained that Stephanie had been encouraging him to spend more time with Mom over the past year, which initially seemed like thoughtful family encouragement. But now he realized she'd been systematically gathering information about Mom's financial situation, medical history, and daily routines. She knew exactly when mom had doctor appointments, which bank she used when her social security checks arrived, everything. I thought she was just being helpful and organized. The picture was becoming clearer and more disturbing. Stephanie hadn't just hidden mom's cancer diagnosis from the family. She'd been positioning herself as mom's primary caregiver and medical advocate, while potentially stealing thousands of dollars in the process. There's something else, Jake continued reluctantly. 6 months ago, Stephanie suggested that maybe I should become mom's power of attorney instead of you. She said mom was getting older and might need someone more locally available to help with decisions. Did mom ever express concerns about me being her power of attorney? No, never. That's what seems strange about Stephanie bringing it up. But she kept mentioning how busy you were with your divorce and how much stress you were under with Emma's custody arrangements. I realized Stephanie had been working to systematically isolate me from mom's medical and financial affairs for months. The Christmas brunch incident wasn't spontaneous rudeness. It was part of a calculated plan to paint me as an unreliable, absent son who couldn't be trusted with family responsibilities. When Lauren returned with her family, I shared my discoveries about the financial irregularities. Her reaction was immediate shock, followed by growing anger. Roger, I need to tell you something about Stephanie that's been bothering me too. Last month, she approached me privately and suggested that mom was showing signs of cognitive decline. She said maybe we should consider having her evaluated for dementia or Alzheimer's. Did you notice any signs of cognitive problems when you visited mom? None whatsoever. She seemed sharp as ever. But Stephanie made it sound like she was spending more time with mom and noticing things the rest of us missed. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Stephanie had been systematically building a case that mom was mentally declining and that I was an unreliable son, while positioning herself and Jake as the responsible family members who should take control of medical and financial decisions. Dr. Foster returned to check on Patricia and update us on her condition. After examining mom and adjusting her medications, she pulled our family aside again. Your mother's spirits have improved significantly since seeing all of you together. However, I'm concerned about the stress she's been under regarding family relationships and financial pressures. She mentioned several times that she was worried about being a burden and that some family members might be upset about treatment costs. Doctor, we're discovering that mom may have been given incorrect information about her insurance coverage and treatment expenses. Someone has been making financial arrangements without proper authority. Dr. Foster looked concerned. Elder financial abuse is unfortunately common, especially when patients are vulnerable due to serious illness. If you suspect fraud or theft, you should report it to Adult Protective Services and local law enforcement immediately. As if on cue, Stephanie returned to the hospital carrying an overnight bag and appearing unusually flustered. Her hair was disheveled, and she kept checking her phone anxiously. How's Patricia doing? Any changes in her condition? Mom's stable, I replied carefully. We've been discussing her treatment history and financial arrangements with the medical team. Stephanie's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, but I caught the flash of panic in her eyes before she composed herself. Good. I'm glad you're finally taking an active interest in her care coordination. The passive-aggressive comment was clearly designed to suggest I'd been absent or uninvolved previously, but now I understood it was part of her broader strategy to undermine my credibility and position herself as the devoted family caregiver. Jake looked between his wife and me with growing tension. The man was being forced to consider that his wife of 7 years might be a manipulative thief who'd been exploiting his dying mother. As the evening wore on, Stephanie's behavior became increasingly erratic. She kept leaving the hospital for unexplained phone calls and seemed nervous about any discussion of mom's medical billing or insurance coverage. When Lauren mentioned that we should review mom's bank statements to understand her financial situation, Stephanie quickly suggested that such matters could wait until Patricia was stronger. But Patricia was running out of time. The cancer was advancing rapidly, and we needed to coordinate her care immediately. More importantly, if Stephanie had indeed been stealing from mom's medical fund, we needed to recover those resources to ensure Patricia could afford proper palliative care during her final weeks. The family was fracturing under the weight of these revelations, but the truth was finally starting to emerge. My mother's cold reception at Christmas brunch hadn't been about holiday stress or family dynamics. It had been the result of months of calculated manipulation by someone who'd been systematically stealing from a dying woman while poisoning family relationships to cover her tracks. The next morning brought harsh December sunlight streaming through the hospital windows as I sat in the financial counselor's office surrounded by stacks of medical bills and bank statements. What I discovered made my hands shake with fury. Patricia's savings account showed a pattern of large withdrawals dating back 14 months, all bearing her signature, but written in amounts and frequencies that made no logical sense. Withdrawals of $4,700, $6,200, and $8,900 appeared monthly, always deposited into accounts I couldn't identify. Susan Martinez, the hospital's patient financial advocate, spread the documents across her desk methodically. Mr. Thompson, these payment patterns indicate someone with intimate knowledge of your mother's account information and spending habits. The signatures are consistent, but the amounts suggest desperation rather than planned medical expenses. What do you mean by desperation? Look at the progression. Early withdrawals were for specific treatment amounts that corresponded to actual medical bills. But starting in September, the amounts became irregular and much larger. Someone was taking money for purposes beyond your mother's cancer treatment. I studied the bank statements more carefully. Susan was absolutely right. The earlier withdrawals matched documented medical expenses, but the recent ones seemed random and excessive. There's something else troubling, Susan continued. Your mother's Medicare Advantage plan should have covered most of these treatments after her annual deductible was met. Someone convinced her to pay cash unnecessarily, creating artificial financial hardship. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Found something in Stephanie's laptop bag. Can you meet me in the parking garage? I excused myself from the financial review and found Jake standing beside his pickup truck, holding a manila folder with shaking hands. His face looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Roger, I need to show you something, but I don't know how to handle what it means for my marriage and my kids. Inside the folder were printed emails between Stephanie and someone named Derek Walsh discussing estate planning strategies and medical power of attorney transitions. The earliest email was dated 8 months ago, just 2 weeks after Mom's cancer diagnosis. One email from Derek read, "Document every instance where Roger appears unreliable or uninvolved. Medical emergencies create opportunities to demonstrate family members' true priorities. Keep detailed records of his absences or delayed responses to family needs." Another email from Stephanie replied, "Patricia's condition is worsening faster than expected. Need to accelerate timeline for POA transfer. Roger's divorce situation provides perfect excuse for why he can't handle medical responsibilities." The final email in the sequence was dated 3 days before Christmas. Everything set for holiday demonstration. Patricia coached on appropriate responses. If Roger brings Emma unannounced, use it as evidence of his poor judgment and lack of family consideration. Jake's voice was barely audible. She planned the whole Christmas brunch disaster, Roger. She coached Mom to reject you and Emma as part of some scheme to make you look like a bad son. Who's Derek Walsh? I have no idea. The email signature shows he's some kind of legal consultant, but I've never heard Stephanie mention anyone by that name. I photographed every document with my phone before returning them to Jake. We need to take this to the police, but first I want to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Back in the hospital, I requested a private meeting with Patricia, while Stephanie was outside making her mysterious phone calls. Mom looked stronger after a night of rest and proper medication, but her eyes held deep sadness. Roger, I need to tell you something about Christmas morning. I didn't want to be cold to you and Emma, but Stephanie convinced me that you were under tremendous stress and that surprising you with my cancer diagnosis would make everything worse for your family. Mom, you should never have been put in that position. Your illness is something we should have faced together as a family from the beginning. I know that now. But Stephanie showed me articles about how cancer diagnoses can destroy families, especially when there are existing tensions like divorce situations. She said protecting you from the burden was actually an act of love. The manipulation was even more sophisticated than I'd realized. Stephanie hadn't just hidden medical information. She'd convinced a vulnerable, dying woman that excluding her own son was somehow protective rather than cruel. Mom, I need to ask you directly about your financial arrangements. Have you been paying cash for medical treatments? Patricia looked confused. Stephanie handles most of the billing coordination with the insurance company. She explained that sometimes it's easier to pay upfront and get reimbursed later rather than waiting for insurance approvals that might delay treatment. How much money have you given Stephanie for medical expenses? I'm not entirely sure of the exact amounts. She keeps very detailed records and always provides receipts when I ask. Maybe $20,000 or $25,000 over the past several months? The actual amount was $37,000, meaning Stephanie had been skimming at least $12,000 while managing Mom's medical payments. But the theft went deeper than simple skimming. Mom, did you know that Medicare Advantage plans have annual out-of-pocket limits? You shouldn't have needed to pay anywhere near $20,000 for your treatment. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to growing alarm. Stephanie said my particular plan had high deductibles, and that cash payments would ensure I got the best possible care without insurance restrictions. I realized Stephanie had been exploiting Mom's unfamiliarity with Medicare regulations to justify completely unnecessary cash payments. She'd invented fake insurance limitations while pocketing thousands of dollars that should have remained in Mom's account. When Stephanie returned from her phone calls, I was waiting with Jake and Lauren in Mom's room. Her confident demeanor faltered immediately when she saw our serious expressions. Is everything okay? Did something change with Patricia's condition? Stephanie, we need to discuss some discrepancies in Mom's medical billing and payment arrangements. What kind of discrepancies? I pulled out copies of the bank statements Susan Martinez had provided. Can you explain why Mom has been paying cash for treatments that should have been covered by Medicare? Stephanie glanced at the documents quickly, then looked back at me with practiced innocence. Patricia preferred to avoid insurance delays and bureaucracy. Cancer treatment is time-sensitive, and waiting for approvals could have impacted her care quality. But Medicare Advantage approvals for cancer treatment are typically immediate, especially for established protocols. There was no medical reason for cash payments. Roger, I think you're second-guessing decisions that were made under stressful circumstances by people who were actually present during the medical consultations. The implication was clear I hadn't been involved enough to understand the complexities of Mom's care. But now I had evidence that her involvement had been deliberately excluded by Stephanie's manipulation. Jake finally spoke up. Stephanie, where did the cash payments actually go? Because according to the hospital billing office, most of these amounts don't correspond to actual treatment costs. Stephanie's composure cracked slightly. Jake, I've been keeping detailed records of every expense. If there are accounting questions, we can review everything at home when Patricia's condition is more stable. We need to review the records now, Lauren interjected. Mom's treatment decisions going forward depend on understanding her financial situation immediately. I don't appreciate being interrogated like I'm some kind of criminal. I've been sacrificing my own time and energy to coordinate Patricia's care while the rest of you were busy with your own lives. The defensive response was revealing. Instead of providing clear answers about financial arrangements, Stephanie was attacking the family for asking legitimate questions. Dr. Martinez, Mom's oncologist, chose that moment to arrive for his evening rounds. After examining Patricia and updating her medication schedule, he confirmed what I'd been hoping to hear. Mrs. Thompson, your Medicare Advantage plan has excellent cancer treatment coverage. I'm surprised to hear there have been significant out-of-pocket expenses because most of your treatments should have been fully covered after your annual deductible was met. Patricia looked at Stephanie with growing confusion. But you said the insurance company was denying coverage for several treatments and that cash payments were necessary to avoid delays. Dr. Martinez consulted his tablet. Actually, all of your treatments have been pre-approved by Medicare, and we've received full payment from your insurance company for covered services. Any additional cash payments would have been unnecessary. The room went completely silent as the implications sank in. Stephanie had been collecting cash payments from Mom for medical treatments that were already fully covered by insurance. The money hadn't been going toward medical care at all. Stephanie stood up abruptly. I think there's been some miscommunication about billing arrangements. Patricia, you should rest now. We can clarify these accounting questions later when you're feeling stronger. But Mom was staring at Stephanie with an expression I'd never seen before. It was a look of dawning realization and betrayal that made my heart break all over again. Stephanie, where is the money I gave you for my cancer treatments? Patricia, please don't upset yourself with financial concerns right now. Your health is the most important priority. Where is my money, Stephanie? The question hung in the air like a blade. Stephanie looked around the room at all of us, clearly calculating whether she could continue her deception or if it was time for a different strategy. What happened next would determine whether my mother would die in peace, surrounded by family, or whether she'd spend her final weeks dealing with the knowledge that someone she trusted had been stealing from her while she fought for her life. The tension in the hospital room became suffocating as Stephanie realized her carefully constructed deception was collapsing. She looked from Jake to me to Lauren, her eyes darting like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. Patricia, I think you're confused because of the medications. We can discuss financial matters when your thinking is clearer. The condescending tone was a massive mistake. Mom's eyes flashed with anger I hadn't seen since we were teenagers getting caught in major trouble. My thinking is perfectly clear, young lady. I asked you a direct question about my money, and I expect a direct answer. Jake moved closer to his wife, his face a mixture of heartbreak and growing rage. Stephanie, just tell us where Mom's money went. If there's an innocent explanation, now's the time to provide it. Stephanie's strategy shifted immediately. Instead of continuing to deflect, she went on the offensive. Fine. You want to know the truth? Patricia has been giving me money because she was terrified about being a financial burden on her children. She begged me not to tell any of you about the cancer because she didn't want you to feel obligated to help with expenses during your own difficult times. She pointed directly at me, especially Roger, who's been so wrapped up in his divorce drama and custody battles that he barely calls his mother anymore. The accusation stung because it contained just enough partial truth to be effective. My divorce had been consuming and emotionally exhausting, and I hadn't been visiting Mom as frequently as usual. So instead of burdening her children, Patricia asked me to help coordinate her care and manage expenses discreetly. Every penny I received went toward her medical needs. Lauren stepped forward. Then, you should have receipts and documentation for every expense, right? You should be able to account for exactly where $37,000 went. Of course I have records. They're at home in my filing system. I didn't expect to be ambushed with accounting demands in a hospital room. But Jake was staring at his wife with dawning comprehension. Stephanie, last month you told me we could afford to renovate the kitchen because you'd been saving money from your part-time work at the real estate office. But you only work 10 hours a week for minimum wage. How did you save $8,000 for kitchen renovations? The question hit like a bomb. Stephanie's face went completely white as she realized Jake was connecting financial dots she'd hoped would remain separate. Jake, my work situation is more complicated than I've explained. I've been doing additional consulting projects. What kind of consulting projects? Elder care coordination, helping families navigate medical systems and insurance complexities. I felt ice forming in my stomach. Are you saying you've been charging Mom for services while also stealing her medical fund money? I wasn't stealing anything. I was providing professional caregiving services that saved Patricia from having to hire expensive medical advocates or care coordinators. The room erupted. Lauren started shouting about exploitation. Jake demanded to know what other families Stephanie had been consulting for. Mom was trying to process that she'd been paying someone to coordinate care that family members would have provided for free. Dr. Foster appeared in the doorway, drawn by the raised voices. I'm going to need to ask everyone to lower the volume. Other patients are being disturbed. But Jake wasn't finished. Stephanie, 3 weeks ago, you bought a $2,000 designer handbag. You said it was a Christmas gift from your sister, but Crystal doesn't have that kind of money. Jake, stop interrogating me like I'm a criminal. Where did the money for the handbag come from, Stephanie? She looked trapped and desperate. Patricia gave me a bonus for helping coordinate her medical care. She wanted to show appreciation for my time and effort. Mom's voice was deadly quiet. I never gave you money for a handbag, Stephanie. The lie was so blatant and easily disproven that it shattered any remaining pretense. Stephanie realized she'd been caught in direct contradiction with Patricia's testimony and began scrambling for a new approach. Patricia, you're clearly confused about our financial arrangements. The cancer treatments and medications are affecting your memory. It was another catastrophic mistake. Accusing a dying woman of mental incompetence in front of her children while being caught in obvious lies about stolen money was like pouring gasoline on a fire. Jake stood up slowly, his hands clenched into fists. Don't you dare suggest my mother is confused when you've been caught stealing from her. I haven't been stealing from anyone, Jake. I've been trying to help your family navigate an impossible situation while being attacked and blamed for caring too much. I decided it was time to reveal what I knew about her larger scheme. Stephanie, can you explain your email correspondence with Derek Walsh about estate planning strategies and power of attorney transfers? Her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Pure panic flashed across her face before she tried to compose herself. I don't know what you're talking about. Jake was staring at her with growing horror. Stephanie, I found the emails in your laptop bag. I read about your plan to document Roger's unreliability and transfer Mom's power of attorney. The confrontation was spiraling beyond anything I'd expected. Stephanie realized she'd been caught in a sophisticated scheme that went far beyond simple theft. She'd been planning to gain legal control over Mom's estate while systematically excluding me from family medical decisions. You went through my personal computer files. You've been stealing from my dying mother while lying to me for months. Your privacy expectations ended when you became a criminal. Stephanie looked around the room at all of us, clearly calculating whether to continue lying or try a different approach. What she chose next revealed the full extent of her manipulation and entitlement. Fine. You want the whole truth? Patricia was never going to recover from this cancer. The doctors told me months ago that her prognosis was terminal. So yes, I started planning for the practical realities of what happens when she dies. The room went completely silent. Even Dr. Foster looked shocked by the casual cruelty of the statement. Patricia's house, her savings account, her father's business assets, everything would eventually go to her children anyway. I was simply organizing things to make the transition smoother and less emotionally traumatic for everyone involved. Jake's voice was barely controlled. You were stealing from my mother while she was dying and calling it estate planning. I was preventing family fights over inheritance by ensuring proper financial management during Patricia's illness. Mom tried to sit up straighter in her hospital bed. Stephanie, I never asked you to manage my estate or plan for my death. I asked you to help with insurance paperwork. Patricia, you're sick and emotional. You need people thinking clearly about practical matters. The paternalistic dismissal was the final straw. Lauren moved toward Stephanie with fury in her eyes. Get out. Get out of this hospital room right now before I call security. Lauren, you're being irrational. Get out. Stephanie grabbed her purse and headed toward the door, but Jake blocked her path. We're not done discussing this, Stephanie. You're going to account for every penny you took from my mother, and you're going to explain your communication with Derek Walsh. Jake, if you think you can threaten me, you're making a serious mistake. I have documentation of this family's dysfunction and Roger's inability to handle responsibility. Any legal proceedings will expose everyone's problems. The threat was clear. She'd weaponize family vulnerabilities and personal struggles to defend her criminal behavior. But as Stephanie stormed out of the hospital room, she left behind something more valuable than any evidence we'd gathered so far. She'd revealed her true character and motivations in front of witnesses, including medical professionals who could testify about her statements. Jake collapsed into the bedside chair, his face in his hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I brought this person into our family and she's been hurting you for months." Patricia reached for his hand weakly. "Honey, you couldn't have known. She fooled all of us." But I knew the situation was far from resolved. Stephanie had $37,000 of Mom's money somewhere, and she demonstrated that she was willing to fight dirty to keep it. She had access to Jake's house, his children, and potentially more evidence of her criminal activities. Most importantly, Mom's time was running out, and we needed to recover her medical fund immediately to ensure she could afford proper palliative care during her final weeks. The real battle was just beginning. The next morning, Detective Sarah Coleman from the county sheriff's office met me in the hospital cafeteria, her notepad open and ready for business. She was younger than I had expected, probably early 30s, with sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen enough elder abuse cases to recognize patterns quickly. "Mr. Thompson, I've reviewed the financial documents you provided, and this case shows classic signs of systematic elder exploitation. The question is whether we're dealing with an isolated incident or part of a broader criminal operation." She spread several photographs across the small cafeteria table. "These are bank statements from 2 other families in your neighborhood who've reported similar circumstances involving a woman matching your sister-in-law's description." My blood went cold as I studied the documents. The first case involved 78-year-old Dorothy Chen, whose daughter Angela had filed a police report 3 months ago about mysterious financial losses following her mother's hip surgery recovery. Mrs. Chen lost nearly $15,000 after someone volunteered to help with grocery shopping and bill paying during her rehabilitation period. The helpful volunteer gradually gained access to her banking information and began making unauthorized withdrawals. The second case was even more disturbing. Harold Vance, a retired high school teacher, had lost $12,000 after his wife died, and someone offered to help him organize estate paperwork and insurance claims. Mr. Vance trusted his volunteer helper to coordinate with insurance companies and handle complex financial documents while he was grieving. The helper convinced him to sign blank checks for estate processing fees and insurance documentation costs that never actually existed. Detective Coleman pointed to specific details in the bank statements. Same pattern in all 3 cases. The perpetrator identifies vulnerable elderly individuals going through medical crises or major life transitions, then offers helpful assistance that gradually escalates into financial control and theft. Are you saying Stephanie has been running this scam on multiple families? We're investigating that possibility, but there's another complication you need to know about. She pulled out a background check report with Stephanie's photograph and multiple name variations listed. Your sister-in-law has a criminal history that your brother was apparently unaware of. The document showed arrests in 2 different states under slightly different names: Stephanie Marie Stevens in Ohio, Stephanie M. Stevens in Indiana, and Steph Stevens in Michigan. The charges included check fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse spanning nearly a decade. She's been using name variations to avoid detection when moving between states. The pattern suggests she targets smaller communities where background checks might be less thorough and where she can establish fake personal histories more easily. I stared at the criminal record in disbelief. Jake had married someone with an extensive history of financial crimes who'd been systematically targeting vulnerable elderly people for years. Detective, does this mean Jake could be considered an accomplice? He's been married to her for 7 years. From everything we've discovered so far, your brother appears to be another victim rather than a willing participant. Stephanie created elaborate false stories about her background and family history to avoid detection. Detective Coleman explained that Stephanie had told Jake her parents died in a car accident when she was 19, forcing her to grow up quickly and become financially independent. The truth was that her parents had disowned her after she stole $15,000 from their family hardware store in Michigan. She's been perfecting her manipulation techniques for over a decade. She researches potential victims through social media public records and community connections before making contact. Your mother became a target when Stephanie started dating your brother and learned about your family's financial stability. The revelation that Mom had been deliberately targeted rather than randomly victimized made the crime even more heinous. Stephanie had pursued a relationship with Jake specifically because she'd identified Patricia as a potential source of financial exploitation. There's something else you should know, Detective Coleman continued. We executed a search warrant at your brother's house this morning and found evidence of communication with at least 4 other elderly individuals in neighboring towns. She showed me printouts of emails and text messages between Stephanie and various elderly people, all following similar patterns of offering assistance with medical coordination, insurance navigation, or estate organization. Your sister-in-law has been operating a systematic elder abuse ring targeting multiple victims simultaneously while using her marriage to your brother as cover for her legitimate community presence. The scope of Stephanie's criminal operation was staggering. She wasn't just an opportunistic thief who'd taken advantage of Mom's cancer diagnosis. She was a professional predator who'd been systematically targeting vulnerable elderly people throughout the region. Detective, what happens to the money she stole? Can we recover Mom's medical fund? We've frozen several accounts associated with Stephanie's various identities, and we're working to trace the stolen funds. However, recovery can be complicated when money has been transferred between multiple accounts or converted into untraceable assets. My phone buzzed with a call from Jake. When I answered, his voice sounded hollow and exhausted. Roger, I need to meet with you immediately. I found something else in Stephanie's belongings that changes everything. 30 minutes later, Jake appeared in the hospital parking garage carrying a briefcase that belonged to his wife. His hands were shaking as he opened it to reveal stacks of documents, fake identification cards, and a notebook filled with detailed information about dozens of elderly individuals. She's been planning this for years, Roger. Look at this. He handed me the notebook, which contained profiles of potential victims, including their ages, health conditions, family situations, estimated assets, and vulnerability assessments. Mom's name was on page 12 with detailed notes about our family dynamics, financial resources, and what Stephanie called exploitation opportunities. According to these notes, she started researching our family 6 months before we even met. She knew about Mom's assets, Dad's business legacy, your divorce situation, and Lauren's family circumstances before she ever started dating me. The notebook revealed that Stephanie had calculated that Patricia's estate was worth approximately $800,000, including the family home savings accounts and business assets from our late father's plumbing company. She'd also noted that I was distracted by divorce proceedings and therefore less likely to monitor Mom's daily activities closely. Jake. She didn't fall in love with you and happen to become involved with our family. She targeted our family specifically and pursued you as a way to gain access to Mom's finances. Jake stared at the evidence with growing devastation. 7 years of my life with someone who was planning to steal from my dying mother before we even met. But the notebook contained even more disturbing information. Stephanie had been in contact with Derek Walsh, who wasn't just a legal consultant, but apparently a partner in her elder abuse operation. Together, they'd been systematically targeting elderly individuals across multiple states. Derek provides legal advice about power of attorney transfers, estate planning manipulation, and how to avoid detection while committing financial elder abuse, Jake explained. They've been working together for at least 3 years. The criminal operation was far more sophisticated than simple theft. Stephanie and Derek had developed systematic methods for identifying vulnerable, elderly targets, gaining their trust, isolating them from family members, and then legally transferring control of their assets before disappearing to new locations. Roger, there's something else you need to see. Jake showed me travel itineraries and airline reservations on Stephanie's laptop. She'd been planning to disappear to Mexico within 2 weeks, taking the stolen money and leaving Jake to face the legal consequences of her crimes. She was going to abandon me and our children while letting me take the blame for everything she's done. The evidence painted a picture of someone who was not just a thief, but a sophisticated criminal who'd been manipulating and betraying people for years without any sign of remorse or conscience. Detective Coleman needed to see this new evidence immediately. But first we needed to confront Stephanie before she realized her criminal network had been discovered and attempted to flee the country with Mom's stolen medical fund. The race was on to recover the money that could pay for Mom's final weeks of care, while ensuring that Stephanie and her criminal partner faced justice for their systematic abuse of vulnerable elderly people. Time was running out on multiple fronts, and everything depended on our next moves. Detective Coleman coordinated with law enforcement across state lines as we discovered Stephanie had already fled to her sister Crystal's house in Louisville, Kentucky. The GPS tracking on her cell phone showed she'd driven there immediately after our hospital confrontation, and bank records revealed she'd been converting stolen funds into cryptocurrency through a complex network of online transfers. She's not planning to hide locally, Detective Coleman explained during our emergency meeting at the sheriff's office. The cryptocurrency conversions and the Mexican travel reservations suggest she's preparing to leave the country permanently. Jake sat beside me looking completely devastated as the full scope of his wife's criminal planning became clear. Detective, what about my children? They're with Stephanie right now, and I don't know if they're safe or if she might try to take them with her when she runs. We've issued an emergency custody order and coordinated with Kentucky law enforcement to ensure your children's safety. But we need to move fast before she realizes we've discovered her criminal network and flight plans. The drive to Louisville took 3 hours, during which Jake and I had the most painful conversation of our lives. He explained how Stephanie had systematically isolated him from friends and family over the years, creating dependency and making it difficult for him to maintain relationships outside their marriage. She always had explanations for why other people were problematic or unreliable. She convinced me that your divorce made you too stressed to handle family responsibilities, that Lauren was too busy with her own children to help with Mom, and that I was the only family member who truly cared about everyone's well-being. I realized Stephanie had been using classic abuser tactics to control Jake while gaining access to our entire family's vulnerabilities and resources. She'd systematically destroyed his confidence and independence while positioning herself as his only reliable support system. Jake, none of us blame you for being manipulated by someone with years of experience in deception and emotional abuse. She's a professional predator who planned this from the beginning. When we reached Crystal's house in a modest Louisville suburb, Detective Coleman coordinated with local police to surround the property. Through the windows, we could see Stephanie moving frantically around the house, packing boxes and loading items into her car. Jake's children, 10-year-old David and 7-year-old Sarah, were sitting quietly in the living room, watching television, apparently unaware of the adult drama surrounding them. Seeing them gave me perspective on how much damage Stephanie's criminal behavior would inflict on innocent children who'd known her as their mother for most of their lives. Detective Coleman knocked on the front door while backup officers positioned themselves around the house. Crystal answered, looking terrified and confused about the police presence. "Ma'am, we need to speak with Stephanie Stevens immediately regarding multiple felony charges, including elder abuse, theft, and fraud." Through the open doorway, I could see Stephanie freeze in the middle of the living room, holding a suitcase and staring at the police officers with obvious panic. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding," Stephanie called out. "I'm just visiting my sister with my children." Detective Coleman stepped into the house with her warrant. "Mrs. Stevens, you're under arrest for elder financial abuse, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." But Stephanie wasn't ready to surrender. She dropped the suitcase and began a desperate verbal attack designed to confuse the situation and make her appear to be the victim. This is harassment orchestrated by my husband's family because they want to steal my children and blame me for their mother's medical expenses. Roger has been pressuring his sick mother to change her will in his favor, and now he's using police intimidation to silence me. The accusations were sophisticated and designed to create doubt about our motivations. But Detective Coleman had seen enough elder abuse cases to recognize manipulation tactics. Ma'am, we have extensive documentation of financial crimes, including bank records, forged documents, and evidence of systematic elder abuse across multiple states. Your criminal history and communication with criminal associates have been thoroughly investigated. Jake stepped forward to speak directly to his children. David, Sarah, I need you to come with me right now. There are some grown-up problems that need to be sorted out, but you're both safe and everything is going to be okay. Stephanie's composure completely crumbled when she realized her children were being removed from her control. Jake, you can't take my babies away from me. I've been protecting this family from financial predators and emotional manipulation. Stephanie, you've been stealing from my dying mother while lying to me for years. You researched our family before we even met and planned to steal from us all along. The confrontation reached its climax when Stephanie attempted one final manipulation. She grabbed her phone and started recording, claiming she was being falsely accused and that the arrest was part of a family conspiracy to steal her children and silence her evidence of our criminal behavior. But her plan backfired completely when Detective Coleman calmly explained the charges while Stephanie's own recorded statements contradicted her claims of innocence. The video captured her making obviously false accusations while being presented with overwhelming evidence of her criminal activities. Mrs. Stevens, we have bank records showing you stole $37,000 from Patricia Thompson's medical fund criminal background checks, revealing your history of elder abuse in multiple states, and communication records documenting your conspiracy with Derek Walsh to systematically target elderly victims? As the handcuffs clicked into place, Stephanie made one last desperate attempt to maintain her victim narrative. My children need me. You're destroying a family based on false accusations and misunderstandings about financial arrangements. But David and Sarah were staring at their mother with growing confusion and fear. They'd witnessed her frantic packing, heard her angry outbursts, and seen police officers arresting her with detailed evidence of criminal behavior. Jake knelt down to his children's eye level. Kids, sometimes adults make very bad choices that hurt other people. Mom has been doing things that are against the law, and now she has to face the consequences for those choices. The drive back to Ohio was heartbreaking, as Jake tried to explain age-appropriate versions of their mother's criminal behavior to his confused and frightened children. But it was also a relief to know that Stephanie's criminal operation had been dismantled, and that she would face justice for the systematic abuse of vulnerable elderly people. Most importantly, the stolen money had been traced and frozen in various accounts, meaning we could recover most of Mom's medical fund to ensure she received proper palliative care during her remaining time. The nightmare was finally ending, but the healing process for our family was just beginning. 3 weeks later, I sat beside Mom's hospital bed, watching Emma carefully color a picture of flowers to brighten the sterile room. Patricia's condition had stabilized somewhat with proper pain management, and the recovered funds ensured she could afford the comfort care she deserved during her final weeks. Stephanie had pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges, including elder financial abuse, theft conspiracy, and fraud across 3 states. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and her attorney advised that fighting the charges would only result in a longer prison sentence. She received 5 years in federal prison with mandatory restitution to all victims, including full repayment of the $37,000 stolen from Mom's medical fund. Derek Walsh was arrested in Michigan as part of the broader investigation into their criminal network. Police discovered they'd been targeting elderly victims across multiple states for over 3 years, stealing an estimated $200,000 from families dealing with medical crises and life transitions. The recovery of stolen funds provided financial relief. but the emotional healing took longer. Jake struggled with guilt and embarrassment about his wife's criminal behavior despite everyone's reassurance that he'd been manipulated by a professional predator who specialized in deception. Roger. I keep thinking about all the warning signs I should have noticed, Jake said during one of our evening visits to the hospital. How could I be married to someone for 7 years and not realize she was stealing from elderly people? Jake? She spent years perfecting her manipulation techniques before she ever met you. She researched our family for months before pursuing a relationship specifically to gain access to Mom's finances. You weren't naive. You were targeted by someone with extensive criminal experience. Patricia had been remarkably forgiving about the betrayal and theft, focusing instead on gratitude that her family was reunited during her final time. The cancer treatments weren't extending her life significantly, but proper palliative care made her comfortable and allowed for meaningful conversations with her children and grandchildren. I'm proud of how you fought for the truth, honey, Mom told me during one of our quiet moments together. It would have been easier to accept the surface explanations and avoid family conflict, but you protected our family when I was too sick and confused to protect myself. Emma had adapted to the situation with remarkable resilience, spending time with her grandmother and drawing pictures to decorate the hospital room. She understood that Grandma Patricia was very sick, but focused on making their remaining time together special rather than dwelling on the sadness of goodbye. Daddy Grandma says you were very brave when someone was being mean to her. Is that why she loves you so much? Grandma loves all of us very much, sweetheart. Sometimes adults have to do difficult things to protect people we care about. The broader community impact of exposing Stephanie's criminal network provided unexpected positive outcomes. Dorothy Chen and Harold Vance both recovered most of their stolen funds, and the investigation led to establishing a county-wide elder protection program to help prevent similar scams. I volunteered to serve on the advisory board for the new protection program, channeling my experience into community education about financial elder abuse warning signs. The painful experience with my own family motivated me to help other families recognize manipulation tactics before they became victims. Jake began the difficult process of divorce and single parenthood, but he found strength in his family's support and the knowledge that he'd chosen to protect his mother rather than enable his wife's criminal behavior. Patricia established a trust fund for David and Sarah's education, ensuring they wouldn't suffer financially for their mother's crimes. Uncle Roger, why did my mom do bad things to Grandma? David asked during one family visit. It was a heartbreaking question that required careful consideration. Sometimes people make very selfish choices that hurt others, buddy. Your mom made some really bad decisions, but that doesn't mean you or Sarah did anything wrong. You're both good kids who deserve to be loved and protected. The healing process included rebuilding family traditions and connections that Stephanie had systematically undermined. Lauren and I discovered that Stephanie had been subtly discouraging family gatherings and creating artificial tensions to keep us isolated from each other and Mom. Patricia passed away peacefully on a quiet February morning, surrounded by her genuine family. Her final words to me expressed pride in my character and gratitude for my persistence in protecting our family bonds despite overwhelming obstacles. Roger, thank you for fighting for what was right when it would have been easier to walk away. That's the kind of man I raised, and I'm proud of who you've become. Emma held my hand during the funeral service, remarkably composed for an 8-year-old who was saying goodbye to her beloved grandmother. Daddy Grandma told me she's proud that you're my father because you protect people who need help. The experience taught our family profound lessons about the importance of authentic relationships over superficial appearances. Stephanie had created an elaborate facade of caring and helpfulness, while systematically exploiting vulnerability for personal gain. In contrast, genuine love required courage, sacrifice, and sometimes difficult confrontations to protect people we care about. Jake eventually found healing through therapy and rebuilding his relationship with his children based on honesty rather than the pretense that had characterized his marriage. He learned to value family loyalty and integrity over material success and social appearances. Roger, I realize now that Stephanie was attracted to our family's stability and love, but she couldn't understand or appreciate what made those things possible. She saw Mom's assets as something to exploit, rather than the result of Dad's hard work and Mom's careful financial management. The Community Elder Protection Program we established helped prevent 3 additional elder abuse cases in its first year of operation. The education and awareness initiatives reached hundreds of families, providing tools to recognize manipulation tactics and financial exploitation before they caused devastating damage. 6 months after Mom's passing, Emma and I attended the program's first annual awareness event. She proudly helped distribute information packets, while I spoke about warning signs and prevention strategies. Turning our family's painful experience into community protection felt like honoring Mom's memory while preventing other families from suffering similar betrayal. Daddy, do you think Grandma would be happy that we're helping other grandmas and grandpas stay safe from mean people? I think Grandma would be very proud that we're using what we learned to protect other families, sweetheart. The legal proceedings concluded with Stephanie serving her full sentence, while Derek Walsh received 7 years for conspiracy and multi-state elder abuse charges. The criminal network was completely dismantled, and law enforcement agencies in 3 states implemented new protocols for investigating financial crimes against elderly victims. Our family emerged from the crisis stronger and more connected than we'd been in years. The artificial tensions and miscommunications that Stephanie had created were replaced by honest relationships based on mutual support and genuine care. Jake's children thrived with consistent family involvement and the security of knowing they were protected and loved. The Christmas spirit we'd lost during that devastating brunch was restored through authentic family connections rather than obligatory holiday gatherings. We learned that true celebration comes from genuine relationships and shared values rather than superficial traditions or social expectations. Emma's relationship with our extended family deepened as she witnessed how adults can face difficult challenges with courage and integrity. She learned that love sometimes requires fighting for what's right, even when it's painful and complicated. The final lesson came from understanding that family bonds are strengthened by protecting vulnerable members rather than accepting harmful situations to avoid conflict. Standing up to manipulation and abuse, even when perpetrated by family members, demonstrates love and loyalty rather than betrayal. Real strength comes from protecting people who can't protect themselves, regardless of personal cost or social pressure. Emma learned that her father's love is demonstrated through action and integrity, not just words or comfort. The experience taught her to value honesty, courage, and family loyalty as the foundations of genuine relationships. Justice was fully served through legal consequences for the criminals, recovery of stolen funds for victims, and prevention programs to protect future potential targets. Our family's healing was complete through restored trust, honest communication, and deeper appreciation for authentic relationships over superficial appearances. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and fighting for what you knew was right? Sometimes protecting the people we love requires us to be brave even when it's uncomfortable or difficult. If you've faced similar situations or have thoughts about how families can protect vulnerable members from exploitation, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. Thank you for listening to our story and for caring about families who face these difficult challenges. I hope sharing our experience helps other families recognize warning signs and find the courage to stand up for what's right. Please like this story. If it resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life family stories and share it with anyone who might benefit from learning about these important issues. Take care of yourselves and the people you love.